It's not about resolutions or intentions. I mean, that can be really helpful sometimes, but it's really about refreshing ourselves, renewing ourselves, just like the Sun King is renewed.
Welcome to Soror Mystica, a podcast exploring life's mysteries and magic through its symbols.
I'm Mariana Lewis, an archetypal tarotist.
And I'm astrologer Christina Farella.
And just as the Soror Mystica guided the alchemist through his holy work, we hope to be your mystic sisters in these conversations, guiding you deeper into the symbolic life. Now is the time to ground your manifestations and release stagnant energy for the new year. Stephanie, the founder of Tangerine Sage Healing, creates a serene capsule for Usui and Holy Fire Reiki, quantum energy healing, and tarot and oracle readings for those who are seeking relief and inspiration to connect with one's most authentic self and life. Use special promo code capital JOY JOY to receive 33% off your first one-on-one session. And for more information, visit tangerinesagehealing.com or go to Tangerine Sage Healing on Instagram or TikTok. I am a longtime client and customer of Tangerine Sage Healing, and as always, can't recommend her enough, so definitely go check Stephanie out now. Shadow work has become one of the most popular methods of self-betterment over the last decade, but what that work really is and the power it actually holds for our lives is deeply misunderstood. In my new workshop, Shadow Work and the Tarot, a guided workshop of self-reckoning with the cards, we will explore exactly how to do real and effective shadow work with the tarot. Tarot is one of the best tools we have for meaningful shadow work, and if we use it the right way, it can guide us to true recognition, integration, and transformation. Join this 3-part workshop hosted by the Jung Academy and myself starting January 2024. And there's still a little bit of time left to grab early bird pricing, so do not wait. Go to jungacademy.com/tarot-and-shadow or go to the link in the show notes or on my bio in Instagram to get your ticket now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 26th episode of Soror Mystica. We're here with you today to explore the symbol of the winter solstice, which we are working ourselves closer to, not quite there yet, but it's a really lovely time of year to think about what this symbol means, to kind of be able to engage with the energy that is kind of abundant in nature and in the kind of mythic themes of this time of human experience. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. But before we get started, I want to remind everybody of our new community, which is called The Cloister, which is a place where you can join us in many different kinds of discussion, chatting, community, engagement. And the whole point of The Cloister is to basically take the energy, the creativity, the symbolic curiosity that we have, that we explore in Soror Mystica, and open that up to working, to having those conversations with you all as our listeners. Because
to our friends,
we have a lot of really smart, curious, interesting people who listen to this show. And it's lovely to be able to kind of explore that in a group, even though we do this on our own as friends all the time. So, welcome into that space. We have it linked in our show notes. Check it out. And we're very happy to be kind of shifting Soror Mystica's energy into that forum as a way of community engagement. So that's that. I'm also still offering my year ahead readings for those of you who are interested in figuring out what 2024 holds for you. You can get on my calendar. I'm offering 90-minute year ahead readings, which are pretty comprehensive. I bring the good Virgo details to the table, just kind of helping you sort out what every phase of the year looks and feels like for you personally, navigating the transits of 2024. And I'll add, if you don't feel like having a personalized reading, but you are looking for general insight into the new year, my seminar or workshop, I should call it, of the transformations of 2024. My forecasting workshop is available for instant replay as
Nice.
something that you can snag for yourself. And it comes with a really beautiful ebook. It's about a 2-hour workshop, and that is linked below as well. So
It's
yeah.
probably a great gift for your astrology-minded friends too.
Oh, how cute. I didn't even
Ooh.
think of that. Well,
Mhm.
another great gift would be to gift somebody a ticket to Mariana's upcoming Tarot and Shadow workshop, which
Mhm.
begins in January. Do you
Yes.
want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we're doing a 3-week workshop exploring the shadow in tarot, where we find it, reversals, court cards, where we find it in the minor arcana, where we find it in the arc of the major arcana, and how to do shadow work with the tarot from somebody who is Jungian minded, and very thoughtful, and has done a lot of research into how to do shadow work safely, but also effectively, and what that
Mhm.
means, and how to use the tarot as one of the best tools we have to do it. So, if that is interesting to you and you want to give your individuation journey a kickstart, um, join us. It'll be great. I'm really, really looking forward to putting this together. So that's happening in January, but you can get cheaper tickets if you buy it now rather than in January. So I highly recommend you do if you're thinking about it.
We're being very
Um,
good businessmen right now.
we
So
are the
yeah.
best
Hmm.
businessmen.
Hmm.
Um, but okay, well, let's talk about what we're reading. We skipped it last time because we chatted you up about all our stuff too much. So we'll fill in some gaps. What are you reading right now?
Right now, I'm reading Many Things as Usual, but I'm working on this book called Divine Escorts, which sounds very exciting. And it's a book all about naiads and nereids in mythology, and like how there are these threshold figures basically for particular moments
So
in
cool.
myth. So, like, what drew me in was a chapter on the abduction of Europa and how
Mm-hmm.
certain nereids and naiads were present for that moment and what
Oh,
that
cool.
means. And yeah, it's a really interesting book. It's just it's extremely scholarly, which is completely fine, but I thought it would be like a little bit more like fun, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
not. It's really, I feel like I'm reading somebody's dissertation, which I very well may be.
Boo.
But I'm also reading The Sacred Prostitute, which I
Oh,
feel
good.
like is a good
Nancy Qualls Corbett.
companion. Yes. No, it's excellent.
Did
I'm
you
so loving it.
there's a someone did an interview with her. Someone actually got an
Oh.
interview with her. She hasn't done that in a really long time. I want to say it was on Speaking of Jung, which is a podcast where
Mhm.
this woman just interviews famous Jungians. Um, and she, shockingly, where do you think Nancy Qualls Corbett would be from? I like immediately pictured like Devonshire, like
Yeah,
England.
I
No,
because
she's
the
from like Alabama, and she talks like this, and she's got
That's
real thick
fascinating.
twang. Oh my god, it is so fascinating. And I was like, so
How cool is that? That's so funny. I
yeah,
mean, I think that the book has like British spellings of things too, so I figured this was somebody in the
I don't
UK.
know. I don't know
Interesting.
what
That's
happened
so
there.
weird.
Maybe they just did that way. But yeah, nope. So that's funny. And that's good. And you're also reading, because we're both going to be reading,
Exactly. Yes.
yes, both reading The Undiscovered Self
Mhm.
by Carl Jung,
Have you heard of that?
because
Have you heard of Carl Jung, guys? Do you know about him?
uh, uh, um, so this is our inaugural book of our Soror Mystica book club, which we are hosting because we talk about books all the time, and we want people to read the good books, even though they're scary, and maybe the books you haven't heard of, but would be really transformative for your life, as many of the books that we've encountered have been. So, The Undiscovered Self is one of the last books that Jung ever wrote, and it is one of his more political books. And of course, it was written like I think 1957 or something like that. So it's a little outdated, but also not at all. So it is a book that is completely about finding yourself in the mass of society, which we all struggle with now. So It's a very short one. It's only like 100 pages, 125 pages or something like that, but it is filled with so much goodness. So we're reading that, and you should join us reading that. And you can do that over at the Soror Mystica community, the cloister, at Mighty Networks, and there's a link. So go do that for sure. You're going to love it. I'm
And
telling
I'll
you.
say we're going to be reading this together, and then we're going to get together and talk about it. So it's
Yeah.
going to be
Yes.
a nice, fun time, and we'll be
And we
letting you
can
know
help
when
you
we're reading.
understand.
I can't
We
help
can
anybody. I can't do that, but
This
I'll
is
be
what I
there.
wish for, like, every book I read. I'm like, so where's the person who can, like, tell me they read this before and give me some insights, because
You
that's
can
always what I want.
certainly do this with this book for sure. So
Yes,
that'll
for
be a
sure.
lovely, cool conversation, because I've picked it up several times, and I
Mhm.
always put it down, and I think that's a bad habit that I have just as a reader in general, but I think a lot of people have that experience. So
Yeah, a lot of
having
people just read a little
yeah,
bit.
knowing that you can
Yeah.
look forward to a cool, sweet discussion with people that you like, and new people that you'll meet too,
Mhm.
is a good
Mhm.
motivator for completing a task like that. So
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so we're talking about the winter solstice. And the winter solstice, this is something that it's a useful episode, I think, for a lot of us, because especially for us kind of witchy people or people on the outskirts of traditional religion, we know that the winter solstice has a lot of meaning and we want to celebrate. We don't necessarily know how or what it is that we're celebrating or what the origins are of why we're celebrating, other than it's Jesus's birthday, which it's not, by the way. And just get right into it. But we're going to explore a lot of these roots of the winter solstice. We're going to look at Celtic roots, and Roman roots, and Near Eastern roots, and it's going to be fun to really explore and kind of like open up what this holiday with this time really symbolizes for us.
yeah.
So why don't we start like with we can start with the fun part of it, which is, well, I mean, first of all, let's cover like winter solstice. We're thinking about Christmas time, right? Christmas
Hmm.
tide, as they would have said at some point. And when we think about Christmas, obviously what we're talking about is the birth of Jesus Christ in Christianity. Factually, they know that Jesus was not born in Christmas time, as we think of it now. He was not born December 25th. I don't know exactly how they know that, but they know that based on texts, and
He's
there's
supposed to be
accounts. And
like a
it's supposed to be like,
Pisces.
yeah, it's supposed to be like March,
Hmm.
or early April, maybe. I've heard before too. But yes, it is generally thought that he's a Pisces, probably actually, and that's when his birthday was. The reason that there's a lot of reasons why we think of Christmas as December 25th, but the main reason was there were these series of councils that were called the ecumenical councils that happened in the years like 300 to 600 ish. And basically, what they were they were all these priests and bishops and whatever, as the church was forming, they'd come together and they're like, we got a lot to decide on. Like, you do this and we do that, and we have to have a singular organized church. And so that was basically these councils. They would come together and they would make decisions on things. And so, in one of these councils, they came together and they decided what date will we celebrate the birth of Christ, because we have to have a date. Because up till that point, I don't remember exactly which year this council particularly was, they didn't really care about the birth of Christ. It really wasn't that important to them. They were far more concerned with the resurrection of Christ and when
Mm.
he died, which was at Passover. And they knew that because that's why he was in Jerusalem, blah, blah, blah. But the Christmas date they decided on intentionally to be December 25th. That was not an accident. That was not just like, oh, why this just kind of happened. They were like, we have reasons. Here are the reasons. Let's execute it. So, that being established, one of the main reasons that they chose December 25th was because the prevailing religion in the Roman state, because Catholicism was really kind of spread through Rome, was still the pagan, Roman pantheon. And so December 25th was like really kind of the center point of the festival of Saturnalia. And so
Hmm.
Christina's going to tell us all about Saturnalia because she's like an expert on it.
No, I just like it. I think about it a lot. Saturnalia is, so I think that to backtrack a tiny bit, like this
Mhm.
time of year that we're in is highly commercialized and
Yes.
extremely stressful, and
Yes.
people are crazy and people spend tons of money and it's like this big superficial mess. And growing up, I was always like, I hate Christmas because I'm so special and I see that it's
And
not.
you were like a goth kid immediately,
I was.
but not really, but a little bit.
I was. No, I totally was. Until
Really?
like, yeah, yes, I had a goth phase. Are you kidding? And then
I did not have a goth phase. I cannot imagine you with the. Did you like have the black like all around your eyeballs?
I tried so hard, but I would have to do my makeup on the bus and then take it off when I was
Oh,
on the bus coming home. And
oh,
then
right, because your parents
also,
didn't want you to have it. Yeah.
my parents were so strict and I had like like my cool like Converse and like my like goth clothes and like my stud belt. I was like very
Oh my
proud of
God.
these things that I obtained. And then my mom one day when I was at school not wearing them, found them all and threw them away. And I was very, very
That
upset.
must have been tragic for
It was a
you.
whole thing. And sometimes I think about it and then I block
You
it
still
out
get angry.
and I
You're
just
like,
get
"Ah."
so sad. And that is just what happened. And I understand that, like, from her perspective, it was aesthetically bad. Like, bad things were going
Yeah,
on for my look. But
right.
I was trying to be an individual. So, anyway, I was still anti establishment. You can't, the stud belt can go, but, my brain remains. So, I really like to bring it back to my point, thinking about what what were ancient people doing at this point in time and what is
Yeah.
like the kind of sacredness of this season. And I just bring that in because it is a sacred time for a lot of
Yes.
things in the cycles of nature. The winter solstice, even though it is cold and dark and bleak, there's no flowers, there's no
Mhm.
plants or anything. It is symbolic of the rebirth of the sun. And
Yes.
so in astrological thinking, the winter solstice, which coincides with the beginning of Capricorn season, which is always around December 22nd. The Romans thought that the winter solstice, like the sun entering that part of the zodiac, was December 25th. They were wrong about that
Yeah.
because it's not always then. Um, but that was a really important moment because it reinvigorated a sense of hope. Because at that point in the year, the days incrementally start to get longer, and the sun, who, dies earlier in the year, now begins to become reborn, and the days get longer and longer. So the
Mhm.
light and the warmth come back. But
Yeah.
before that, right, the festival of Saturnalia was really important to ancient Romans because it was symbolic of this sort of return of a golden age. And
Yeah.
so, I think that in a lot of periods of time, life is really difficult. And we all kind of symbolically yearn for what would feel like an idyllic, pastoral, easy moment to be alive. And
Yeah.
in the poet Hesiod's works and days, and in other texts too, but this is the most famous example, he outlines the four phases of man's existence. And the first one was the Golden Age. And this was exactly what it sounds like. It's this pastoral, idyllic, everything we need comes from the earth. There's no work, there's no strife. People would live for a really long time, but look young and then pass away peacefully in their sleep. Like it was
Mm,
sounds great.
that
And
sounds great.
what's interesting about that era, though, is that the god Saturn or Kronos was the god who was in charge of that period of time. And so I want to kind of pull this apart later in a few minutes, but it's an interesting inversion of what we think of Saturn as now, because
Yeah.
Saturn is known as like the god of time and restriction and boundaries and rules. How
Yeah.
come he's associated with this golden moment? So that's like a question that I
Yeah.
have. And then afterwards, you know, um, we have the Silver Age, where Kronos and Astrea, the goddess of justice and harmony, were kind of co ruling on Earth. And then comes the Bronze Age, where man became very selfish, apparently, and money was introduced, and people became competitive with each other. And Astrea fled Earth, all the gods left Earth, and she specifically became the Virgo constellation.
Mm,
And then now we're in the Iron Age where there's nothing but drudgery and everything is bad. And so that's like, we haven't left the Iron Age. That's where we are at. But
yep.
Saturnalia is symbolic of the return temporarily or the memory of that golden moment where Saturn was in charge of
Yeah.
what was going on. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's so cool. I think that it's kind of like there's a, what is it called in Switzerland? Is it Fastnacht? There's like a
Mm-hmm.
similar festival where they have this like this festival of like just pure carnival esque, fun and joy and debauchery, and silliness. And that's very much sort of what it seems like Saturnalia had at its core. It's like,
Oh
let's
yeah,
be wild. It's sort of like, it's
it's
interesting because it's like the opposite of what Saturn would expect of us.
That's what I'm saying. So why this is a question that I have that I don't have an answer to. And, it is an interesting thing to reflect on. So Saturnalia, the festival for the ancient Romans, began on December 17th. There were 12 days of it, like we have 12 days of Christmas, 12 zodiac signs, 12 labors of Hercules, whatever. It's one of those numbers that always comes up. And in the Saturnalia experience, it was a time of huge partying and revelry. And so, like in Italy, they still have carnival. And that's like everybody's wearing masks and dressed up. And it's very famous for being this kind of wild, debauched sort of environment. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what Saturnalia was as well.
Yeah.
But the theme of Saturnalia, principally beyond debauchery and fun and gift giving and just like consumption and all of that stuff, was inversion. And so,
Mm.
in the, definitely in ancient festivals and up through the medieval period, carnival or Saturnalia celebrations would feature, for example, masters would become slaves for the day, and the
Right.
slaves would sit
Right.
at the master's table and be served by the masters. Men and women would cross dress a lot. There was a lot
Mm-hmm.
of gender play and inversion. It was like a kind of queering of reality, basically, an
Yeah.
opportunity for that. And so the experience of the inverse being true,
Right. Which makes sense
yeah.
if it's the opposite of what Saturn is.
Yeah, it still doesn't answer my question of why is Saturn associated with the golden age in general, but
Yeah.
maybe it has something to do with a truth that I think is locked away in Saturn, which is, yes, he makes things challenging and feel barren and feel unfun, but if we work with him in a particular way, I believe he creates a structure and he creates a kind of system for living with
Mm-hmm.
which can come a lot of fecundity. So that's kind of where I would take that, but I'm
Yeah.
open to other people's interpretations of that.
It kind of reminds me of, so like Jung was really into astrology, and one of the things that he associated Saturn with was the shadow.
Mm-hmm.
And there is this idea of the golden shadow,
Mm.
which is kind of like this experience of like, there's this idea attached to it of like unlocking the shadow and having this kind of embrace of what has not been seen, that is
Mm. Yeah,
liberated.
it's and
Yeah.
so in that way, that's really beautiful. Like bringing power and those who have power, and inverting it and bringing, who is usually kept invisible into the light
Yeah.
feels like that kind of inversion. I actually want to read from my symbols book, the Saturnalia
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
entry. So they write the sinister aspect of Saturn. So that's going against everything we're saying. The winter
Yep.
solstice, the death of the old year and the birth of the new, Solus Invicti, the birthday of the unconquerable sun, the passage from chaos to cosmos, the suspension of time, the dead
Mm.
returning during the 12 nights of the duration of Saturnalia. It's interesting.
Yeah.
It is also the time of sacrifice of the old king or his
Hmm.
scapegoat as waning fertility and instigating the enthronement of the new king as virility.
Yeah.
The 12 days of chaos symbolize the pattern of the coming months of the year, right? So that's another 12 that we have.
Right.
And the period of chaos is governed by the Lord of Misrule, or the King of the Bean and the Queen of the Pea. And then they have in all caps transvestitism. Is a feature of the time of Saturnalia. Orgies, carnivals, etc. signifies a form of a return to chaos. Babylon held the 12 days of duel between
Mm.
chaos and cosmos. In Christianity, these are the 12 days of Christmas. So
Yeah.
Lot
Very
there.
interesting. It sounds
Hmm.
like I like the idea of chaos giving way to cosmos, to order, right? So it's almost like the Saturnalia was associated with this kind of like clearing out of the chaos. Like
Hmm.
all of that was like building up
Pent
under the
up.
surface.
Hmm.
And just let it out, let it be chaotic. And then we can kind of get back to the regular rule of things with the birth of the new year. It's kind of like the idea of the purge. Have you seen those movies? Of course, you haven't seen those, but they're great and terrible. And the idea is like everybody has held on to all this misery and darkness, and so one day a year they can commit any crime and not be punished for it. And then so the movie is about like how awful can we make this situation for people, but that's a very similar idea. That is so interesting. It's very different from the rest of what well, not very different. There's certainly similar themes. It's a little bit distinct from the other themes of the winter solstice that we see
Mhm.
across time. Saturnalia definitely has the more
It's
kind of
its own thing. Yeah.
yeah, it is.
Hmm.
We don't have that in Christmas. We do not have the like, it's Christmas time to have an orgy. That's not a thing. But one of the things that you mentioned that the book mentioned was the Sun King,
Yeah.
right? And so that is really the thing that we focus on the most with our current idea of the winter solstice, or the main idea of the winter solstice. As you said, it was like the days were getting shorter, sun was disappearing, and then finally we have the winter solstice, which is the day that the sun finally starts to return. It's a little bit longer, and then he's resurrected. The main theme that we see over and over again in the winter solstice across the world is that the sun dies and then is resurrected. So the main theme is actually death and resurrection
Hmm.
in the winter solstice. We symbolize that in Christ's birth with the birth of the new king, right? So we don't have the resurrection at the same time as his birth, but the birth aspect is certainly there. Christ is very much the Sun King
Yeah.
figure in
Yeah.
Christianity. And when we talk about the Sun King, what we mean is the masculine figure who is associated with the solar deity. We see this actually in so many traditions. Some interesting things. You may have heard before of the story of Ishtar and Tammuz, or Inanna, same goddess, and basically her the descent of Inanna. We've talked about that myth before. One of the elements of the story of Inanna, or Ishtar and Tammuz, is that um, Tammuz, her husband, he's called other names too, was sacrificed at the end of the year in her place, and then he was resurrected, or a new husband was chosen, and so there was the rebirth of this like solar kind of deity, this masculine deity, and that the celebration of that feast was December 25th in the ancient world.
Crazy.
Amazing.
Yeah,
And then
totally.
we also have the story of Isis, Osiris, and Horus. That story is basically that um, Osiris is killed by his brother, and his body is kind of like cut up into pieces and sent out into the world. And Isis is heartbroken, and she's trying to bring back her husband and bring pieces of his body back together. She finds part of his body and lays with him basically, and gets pregnant. And so Osiris is dead. Osiris ends up becoming the lord of the underworld. But from that union, Horus is born, who is not the sun god, but also a very sun king figure, very very much a solar sort of deity. And his feast day with Isis, guess what? December 25th. There's a
Hmm.
theme of this idea of the king, the sun king, having died and then resurrected. Very, very important in the ancient world. And that was something that you mentioned that you read from that book too, the
Hmm.
resurrection of the Sun King. So this is, a main theme that Jesus the birth of Jesus was kind of iterating as well, of like the resurrection of the new king, the solar deity, the sun king. He is the light, right, that we will now follow. And so there isn't the death part of it. But what I like to think about a lot is that I always like to have a feminist angle with things. On my blog a few years ago, I wrote a little dumb blog post that was called Christmas, a Feminist Revision, because I thought I was so adorable.
You are
And
so adorable. That's so
very silly.
cute.
And I was rereading it and I was like, okay, well, there's some smart stuff in it. And one of the things that's so important in these stories as well is that these gods, these people, were resurrected through the Theotokos, which is an ancient term that means the throne of God, which was always a term given to like a mother goddess, essentially. It was given to Isis, and it was also given to Mary early in Christianity, and then it was revoked from Mary at one of these ecumenical councils
Mhm.
because the term implies divinity, and Mary was not allowed to have divinity, and so that was a very strong choice that they made.
That's nice.
So yeah, but there's an aspect to it that is that the Sun King is birthed through the portal of the Mother Goddess, right? So it is really about the both of them. The sun returns because the Earth spins, right? And so we have this kind of union of those two things, that through the portal of the mother of the Theotokos of the throne, we have the rebirth of the king. And so, of course, with Mary, Christmas is really about her. If it's about anyone, it's about the fact that she had a child in a stable and
Hmm.
survived it,
Hmm.
um, and that she was the vessel. And so, she acts as the Theotokos there, birthing the god into the world. And so, I think that that's a very important piece of the story too.
Yes, totally. Yeah,
Mhm.
I love that. And I think that it's a great way to pull in the feminine back into this,
Mhm.
very kind of kingly sort of celebration. Like, so, starting with Christmas, which is obviously we're thinking about the birth of Jesus in the way that we
Mhm.
tend to think about it.
Mhm.
And then even Saturnalia being so focused on on Saturn.
Mhm.
Um, but, so we have these two very masculine figures, but it seems like the farther back you go with Isis, Ishtar, Innana, there is this presence of the feminine in relation to these more masculine Sun King figures, as of course
Yep.
the gateway through which the Sun King has to pass. So
Mhm.
I think that that is a really cool, yeah, way to hold that and think about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that, one of the things we haven't touched on yet, which is the thing that probably most of us are familiar with, or the witchy people are familiar with, is the idea of Yule. Yule is a 12-day festival, usually thought of that way, although some people say it's longer, a couple months even. Just like Saturnalia was, 12 days is very interesting. There's also
Mhm.
12 days of Christmas, if people didn't
Yeah.
know that, for those who are not Christians or practicing Christians.
Did you do that
And
growing up though? We didn't do that. We were just like,
kind of. I
yeah.
mean, a little bit. We did a little bit. Do you
For
know why there's 12 days
Christmas,
of Christmas?
because astrology is in everything. Why?
Yeah, yes, but the reason they gave is because it took the wise men 12 days
Oh, I
to
knew
get.
that. Yes, I was like, it's the Magi, of course, who were
Mhm.
astrologers. They were following a star.
They were.
Hmm.
It's called the Feast of the Epiphany.
Yes, I
And
totally. That was like stored, filed so far back in my brain, but as soon as you started talking about it, I was like, it's
Mhm.
them. Hmm.
When I was a church singer, that was like, I was like, finally, we're done with this nonsense. Christmas was so rough. I was always very excited for the Feast of the Epiphany. So, yes. So with Yule, Yule is actually the holiday that Christmas is most obviously overlaid on top of. And that when at this ecumenical council where they came in and they said, okay, we're gonna we're gonna put Christmas somewhere, they chose Saturnalia, and they also chose that time because of Yule, because Yule really is the celebration. It's the Celtic pagan celebration of the return of the sun, of the solstice. It is a long festival. One of the things that we have that comes directly from the festival of Yule is the Yule log. the Yule log was a big piece of wood that they burned for 12 days outside. And, in celebration of the sun returning, they kept the fire lit for that whole time. And so when they were looking at where's Christmas going to be, they were saying, well, here in these Celtic territories, we want to convert all these people to Christianity.
Right.
And they really love their Yule thing. So what we'll do is we'll say, you thought you were celebrating the return of the sun. You're actually celebrating the birth of Christ.
Did you know?
Yeah, did you know? So that's how they got away with that. And so with Yule, I think that's a lot of what us kind of neo-pagan inquiring people are very interested in, how to celebrate Yule or work with Yule. And unfortunately, a lot of the practices are lost to time because the Celtic peoples didn't really document things. It wasn't really a thing that they did. So we have them from basically accounts of like missionaries and monks who decided to write down the crazy stuff that they were seeing. And one of the things I was researching for this episode that I found, which I find really interesting, was this day called Modranicht. Modranicht. I don't know if I'm saying that right. And it meant the Night of the Mothers. And it was Christmas Eve, and it was celebrated by Anglo-Saxon pagans. And it was basically a night in which they would sacrifice. They would make sacrifices to the mothers. And so that feels to me very relevant too to the discussion of like how the Sun King would be sacrificed, the male deity would be sacrificed, clear out what doesn't work anymore, clear out the old, get reborn. And so I think that is, if we're, what I think would be useful as we kind of tie up this discussion we've like explored a lot, is to say, how do we enter this time of the winter solstice with a little bit more consciousness about how we want to celebrate it. I love to give presents on Christmas Day. I'm never going to not do that. I love to go to mass sometimes. That can be a lot of fun because it's all pretty.
It feels
and
special.
It feels nice. And yeah, that can be really sweet. But how do I celebrate it consciously as a post-Christian person? And how do we do that? And I think that understanding the core themes can be very, very useful. Understanding that it's about the return of the sun. So the sun symbolically, as the tarot tells us, is about hope, right? It's about the possibility of new life, rejuvenation. But it's also about the death of the old, right? And kind of slaying and killing away that which we do not want to bring into the new year, and which has in some ways becomes, just sort of stale and unusable and needs new energy to it. So those are very important themes. And I really like bringing in the idea of Saturnalia and being like, how do we kind of like let ourselves shed some of this stuff that we've been holding on to the whole year and just be a little bit wild and nuts. We should have a Saturnalia night.
I know.
We should do that. But it might get weird. I don't want to do weird things, and I don't want to go out and like.
It'll only be as weird as you make it, Mariana. Jesus, we can do
it safely. We can be
safe.
Sweet.
Yeah. We've done things together that are slightly dangerous but also safe, and it's going to be fine. Yes. And I think that would be a great project. So
yeah. How to have a Saturnalia night. I have Saturnalia incense, so we could light that, have a glass of wine, and you know what I used to do in high school with my group of friends? This was the most horrible thing we ever did, and it was also amazing. We got so mad and frustrated with each other all the time. We kind of hated each other, all of us. I hated everybody all the time. And we decided that we would act as each other for the entire lunch hour as we're sitting at the table, like having lunch. We would pretend to be each other for the whole hour, and you couldn't break character. And we would just roast each other and tear each other to pieces. And like, it was so mean and horrible. And we would also be dying laughing. And it felt very much like Saturnalia, where it's just like topsy-turvy day.
That is very weird. You're a weird person.
All girls Catholic high school, man. It gets weird. I'm telling you, weird things can happen. But yes, so I think that is, I want to bring the conversation there of like, what can we do? Like, what practices can we have? I keep it very simple. On the winter solstice itself, I have a tradition of making Sun King soup,
Mm-hmm.
which is delicious and my favorite soup ever. And then I'll if I have time, I'll try to bake a loaf of bread. And I'll also make a lemon drink.
So
One of
solar
Yeah,
foods.
all solar
Mm-hmm.
foods. My Sun King soup, just for people if they want the recipe. There's a pagan website out there that has a great recipe, and it's basically just onions, tomatoes, and orange juice. Extremely
Crazy.
strange and so delicious, and it's so 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 good. So I do that, and then on the solstice, at the time of solstice, I will light all my candles and keep them burning. And I also like to listen to Lorena McKennett's Christmas album and play that because she's very pagan and weird too in the background. And those are just some small things that I do that are like little practices to celebrate the return of the sun, the return of hope, the
Mm-hmm.
return of, new life and the welcoming of it. What kind of things do you do on the solstice?
I often find myself actually visiting family during
Oh
this
yeah,
time of
you are
year.
always
I'm
visiting family.
always
Yeah.
with my family, and so I'm like always in my childhood bedroom, like, and so my mom does Christmas very beautifully. And
Yeah.
if you ever come to my mom's house, you'll see she does. The house looks gorgeous, and we do a
Picture it.
nice Christmas tree. She actually has two trees,
Wow.
one in the front, like front window room, like that faces the road, so people know that we have a Christmas tree, and then
Right.
like the Christmas tree, and it's very cute.
Yes.
But what I wind up doing usually is, yeah, something with a candle, something small that
Hmm.
I can do without bothering people.
Yep.
But I also feel like I focus on food. So I'll be making like little cookies and stuff, things that
Hmm.
are like circular,
Hmm.
and that solar way. But in terms of what I would do, I would definitely love to, like, if I could do anything, I would throw a huge party on
Oh yeah.
Saturnalia, which is funny. It's one of my brother's birthdays, December
Oh, is it
17th.
really?
Mm-hmm. And it makes sense for like a Sag person to be like, I'm Saturnalia. Like it's just so
Yeah.
boisterous, and he's a hilarious person. So that makes a lot of sense. But I would throw a huge party on Saturnalia with lots of red wine, and I would want it to feel very like Dionysian, like very kind of,
Hmm.
that theme. And then on the solstice itself, yeah, it is about orienting ourselves to the light. So any kind of symbol of, if I was going to do anything, I would probably do like a road opener candle spell or something like that. Or
Yeah, that
I
sounds
have
great.
like a solar spell in general feels like a
Hmm.
good little seed to plant at that point in time. So,
Hmm. Yeah,
mhm.
it's a great time to pull out the sun from your tarot deck and make a little altar for it and just leave it up
Mm.
there. And when you're dragged to mass or whatever, you can think of the birth of that little sun baby, the light of hope that we are refreshed, that we are recycled, and that and remembering too that this is all through the portal of what the feminine represents, which is return, cyclic nature. This happens again and again and again and again, and it's
Mhm.
never the last time. And that by the end of the next year, we will also be stale and grumpy and need a refresh. And as you prepare for your new year, that might be something to remember as well. It's not about resolutions or intentions. I mean, that can be really helpful sometimes, but it's really about refreshing ourselves,
Yeah.
renewing ourselves, just like the Sun King is renewed. And that's that festival. Participating in that festival in our own way can actually be a very beautiful way of ritualizing that for ourselves. I'm a very big proponent of making things that we're doing internally in our inner psychic space ritualized,
Mm.
because it feels real, it feels potent. So those are my thoughts on it. And I don't know when I'm going to see you at Christmas time, but let's try to do a Saturnalia moment.
Okay, I'm in. Let's have a Saturnalia, and it's gonna be great. So I'll see you there.
We'll be there. And let's do a dream.
Yes, let's do it.
If you're enjoying this podcast, we encourage you to leave a review or learn more about how you can support us on Mighty Networks, where you can get access to some exciting exclusive offerings. Or you can connect with us by sharing a symbolic experience, whether from a dream or synchronicity, for us to explore on the show. Thank you to today's sharer, and please tell us your symbolic experience or connect with us on our website, sorormysticapodcast.com.
Are you a small business looking to reach a targeted audience of people interested in all things esoteric? If this sounds like you, Soror Mystica would love to invite you to become an ad partner. We offer a highly tailored audience of mindful, curious, depth-seeking listeners, and we would be delighted to showcase your business and offerings to new hearts and new minds. Simply fill out an advertiser application form at our website, linked in the show notes below, or navigate to sorormysticapodcast.com/advertise with us.
Jungian Online presents Jung Academy, a personal growth learning platform for you. Join expert faculty, analysts, authors, and artists for live and video classes and events in the continuing tradition of Jungian psychology. Join us live or watch later. Our courses are accessible and presented in a way that everyone can follow and enjoy. Come together in search of meaning. Come explore jungarcademy.com. And as a recent addition to the faculty, I can't encourage you highly enough to go check out jungarcademy.com. So this is not actually a dream. We have sort of a synchronicity and a kind of a question, and it's really interesting. So our writer writes, I was stung yesterday by a yellow jacket on my Achilles heel. First, ouch. But secondly, it got me thinking about Chiron and the Achilles heel wound. And of course, I ran to my computer to see where Chiron was in relation to my chart. Lo and behold, Chiron is opposite my North Node in Libra in the 4th house exactly. I've struggled my entire life relating to my mother. Let me just say she wasn't that warm and fuzzy mom I was looking for, and so I desperately wanted to feel like she cared, but alas, she wasn't the person I could go to for any type of comfort. Fast forward to the present day, and I'm witnessing my mother aging, and it's difficult to watch. Our relationship has been strained for the last 2 years, most likely because I finally initiated boundaries, which I believe are throwing her for a loop. I've struggled to move more towards North Node in Libra. I am good in the South Node Aries, like really good. But I know I need to move through that path to the North Node in Libra, especially with that dynamic of my mother. I would be curious what your thoughts are on this little buzzy friend of mine attempting to show me something I may be missing here. Super, super interesting. We got a lot of context, so we can actually dig into this.
Yeah, that's
so
great.
I'm going to completely defer to you. Tell me what your thoughts are.
Okay. So because it is so astrologically based, I think it's interesting to just kind of start there, and we can branch out for sure. So in the first thing that I think when I see these connections is that if Chiron is perfectly opposite the North Node, it means it's perfectly conjunct the South Node, because the North and South Node are always aligned. And so that wounding, that, so for everybody listening, Chiron is an asteroid or a minor planet that speaks to the experience of an innate wound that we have, that we usually try to heal in other people, but really need to be healing in ourselves. And so it's interesting that our writer believes that they're really good at the South Node thing, because that's where their Chiron is. So I would kind of immediately just like put that back in their court and say, consider the wound in relation to that Aries South Node that you already feel like you're comfortable with. So there is a tension between Chiron and the North Node in Libra, but Chiron is also complementing and part of that story of the South Node in Aries. So that's very interesting, first and foremost, right? But isn't that so funny? Like that always, I feel like not always, that happens a lot where we're like, I've got this part of myself. Like, I know how to do that. I don't know how to do this other thing. But then actually a really strong kernel of what that struggle is attached to the thing that we feel like we already need to do. Does that make sense? Like,
oh yeah, completely.
Yeah.
We have, it's like one of the clear signs of like the needing to kind of deconstruct the ego complex a little bit, because it thinks it's really really nail the thing that it's not seeing the most.
Yeah.
We all do that.
Yes, that's a very
Yes.
eloquent way of
We're like,
putting it.
I'm not, I don't, overstep my boundaries. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, this is probably one of the main things that you do is overstep your boundaries. We all do that to some extent when we're trying to work with some shadow material, which I know that the South Node is not only about that, but definitely has hints of that in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the South Node is about, it's this energetic point in the chart that lies in relation to the North Node, which is about, the path forward. The South Node can symbolize a gift that we already have in this lifetime that we've received from a previous lifetime, but we're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be balancing the two and bringing them into harmony. And so the kind of split between Libra Aries is balancing the me versus the we. And I think that that's where this mother stuff comes into, because
Mm-hmm.
that's our first relational, experience in life. So I
Mm-hmm.
see how
Mm-hmm.
our listener went there. But the Achilles heel part of the story is
Yes.
also really interesting. And so I looked it up. There is an asteroid, I think it's number 588. And I'm going to confirm that. But there is an Achilles asteroid. And so I would invite our listener to go on astro.com and plug Achilles as an asteroid into the chart and see where it's
See what
sitting.
happens. Oh,
I
yes,
would
for sure.
also, one last thought, and then I want to hear from you, because I'm like excited and talking over you. But my last idea is that wasps are a symbol of algal or Medusa. They're one
Mm.
of the creatures that are associated with her. And so I had like a really weird experience this summer where I began kind of connecting with Algol, who,
Mm-hmm.
if people don't know, is the decapitated head of the Medusa and is a very important star in the sky. And she sits at around 26 degrees Taurus. And so she's a dark goddess energy for sure. And she's very protective, a kind of dark mother figure. So I would ask our listener, because anytime I hear wasps, I think of algal. Oh, I should complete the thought. When I started connecting with algal myself this summer, a huge wasp's nest appeared in the tree in front
Yes,
of my living room window. And I was like, that is crazy.
that's her.
So they're her friends. Where is algal in your chart? Where is 26 degrees Taurus? Is there a planet or point around that that can draw you into a deeper engagement of what that
Yeah,
wasp sting was trying to get you to do?
I love that.
So okay, cool. That's my brain. What do you think here?
I was thinking of wasps. I got stung by a whatchamacallit, a yellow jacket when I was a kid, and I remember that being one of the most traumatic things
Hmm.
that I thought had ever happened to me at the time.
Well, it's because it's scary, and then the adults also freak out. Like it's like
Yeah, they do
everyone
freak out.
knows. Hmm.
I was on the playground, so no one even paid attention to me because there was like
Oh,
1,000 kids around, and I got stung in the cuticle.
oh,
Um,
weird.
yes, and it was really, really painful, and it was because this thing had been buzzing around me, and I literally, like, swiped it away, and then it came back and, like, was very vindictive and angry
They're
at me.
very focused.
They
Hmm.
are, and that was really bad, so I have a lot of sympathy for you.
Yes.
Of that experience is horrible, and it's horrible when they get you right where it's sensitive. I also I've had 2 major wasp dreams. One I told you about that happened
Hmm.
recently where, like, my house was filled with them. But then did I ever tell you about the one that I had? I was like, right when I started my analysis, I had a dream. Oh, this is so freaky. Again, exposing my psychology, everybody. I had a dream that a yellow jacket carved an upside down cross into my forehead.
Oh my God, you are wild. No, you never told me that.
I was like, that's not good. Why did that
Help.
happen? I even drew it. I was so upset that I brought it to my analyst and I drew a picture of it. And I was like, what does it
Wow.
mean? And she's like, I don't know. Let's talk about your mother. And I was like, no, thanks.
Oh my
Um,
God.
no, I don't know. It's crazy. Anyway, I think that the yellow jacket, it's a bee, not a bee, right? So bees are actually, when we think about symbolically, there's so many good things associated
Mm-hmm.
with bees, right?
Yep.
So much. They're scary looking sometimes because we know that they can sting us, but they're also, they make honey, they make sweet things. They work in communion with each other in community. They are extremely necessary for our ecosystem. Bees are very, very good. This is not a bee. This is a yellow jacket. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like disguised by something good, and it's as something good, and it's actually something that has a lot of poison and a lot of harm that it's capable of. And so I think that that's interesting that it got you at the Achilles heel. Of course, Achilles, in the myth, as we were saying right before we jumped on, um, the reason that Achilles' heel is vulnerable is because he was dipped in the river to be made, and he was made invulnerable by being dipped into the river. Which, do you remember what river it
Sticks.
was?
Mm-hmm.
Styx. He was from
Yeah.
Styx, right? So he was dipped into the river Styx by his mother, but she had to hold on to one part of him, which was the heel. And so that was the one place that he would be vulnerable. And so this listener is really felt immediately connected to the mother wound when this incident happened. And I would say that might be part of the story to explore too, that the idea of Achilles being dipped in the water is to be made invulnerable, to be protected, to be like shrouded in care, right, for his physical experience. But she missed a spot. And so it sounds like you're also holding some space for the spot that was missed, which was a pretty
Mm-hmm.
enormous spot in your case. And so that might be something to kind of think about as well, how that is symbolically significant because of the myth that originates to that space is extremely vulnerable. I wonder if there's something here about, as you're watching your mother get older, and your dynamic is changing because you are protecting your vulnerable spots and you're learning how to do that. There might be something here to examine about feeling into what that vulnerability is really like for you, and that discomfort with being vulnerable to her refusal to care for you the way that you deserve, because now you do have boundaries, because now it is safer to do that, and you're not necessarily going to fall apart and try to like maybe run back and say, will you love me now? And accept that things are the way they are, and that she now is vulnerable, which puts you in a position of a little bit more power in terms of your dynamic, a little bit more strength. So it might be the stinging of the heel might be a little bit of a synchronistic buzz from the universe that says it's time to make a little bit room for your own vulnerability and let that be examined in a way that you're not going to fall apart, or not going to feel ruined by it. You can heal from this little sting,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So it
Yeah.
might be something there.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I love it. It really encapsulates, all of these disparate pieces of this experience that our writer was like wise enough to fold the mother element into this this question of like, what does this mean? And I think that Algol too, as the dark mother, kind of tries to get our attention and say, hey, there's something here that's not incomplete, but that is needs to be protected, needs to
Mm-hmm.
be contended with and dealt with. And I think that in the myths, it is interesting that Thetis or Thetis,
Mm-hmm.
Achilles' mom,
Mm-hmm.
is the one that's responsible for trying to protect him
Yeah.
from the world, but then eventually, misses this vulnerable spot, um, and it causes his demise. And I do think that that's probably symbolic of how our moms, even if they're not the warmest and fuzziest, do, I think, usually try to
Try.
protect us, but there's always going to be that spot that the mother misses. And so,
Yes.
how do we fill that in on our own? So, I
Mm-hmm.
was just looking it up too. So, there is an Achilles asteroid, it's number 588, and there is a Thetis asteroid as well, it's number
Oh, good.
17. So, I love to do this with asteroids, putting them, asteroids of characters who are involved with one another in myth into the chart and treating them like a representation of the pieces of that myth, or even a complex if you feel like getting Jungian about it, and seeing
Mm-hmm.
where it sits in your chart and how it might manifest might be really helpful.
That sounds like a great idea. So you have some stuff to work with. And we wish you all the best in that pursuit. And we hope that you are healed from your wasp sting.
Yeah, feel
That's
better.
horrible.
And thank you for sharing that with us.
Yes. Okay, so everybody have a lovely winter solstice time. We will see you sometime soon. We're probably going to take a little break for our own winter solstice celebrations, as we will be trying to get in some Saturnalia times together. But we really wish you a lovely holiday season. And thank you so much for, as always, being listeners and being here with us. We are very excited to see you in the new year. And for anybody who enjoys this podcast and really wants to engage deeper, we really, really would love to see you over at our cloister. So come join us there, read a book with us, listen to some juicy extra podcasts that get even more random and tangential and niche.
Talk about dreams.
Let's talk about dreams too. So let's do all of that over there, and we really hope to see you there. And all the other good stuff that we're offering is in the show notes.
Wonderful.
And all right. Have a beautiful holiday season, everybody. Thank you for joining us in our conversation today.
Please consider supporting the podcast by leaving a review and following Soror Mystica wherever you listen.
You can also become a more active supporter and a member of the Soror Mystica community by joining us on our Mighty Networks platform.
If you have a symbolic experience that you'd like to share with us for the podcast, you can tell us all about it at sorormysticapodcast.com.
The music for this podcast is written and performed by me, Mariana Lewis, with special thanks to Stefan Lewis. You can connect with both Christina and myself on Instagram and get to know our work by clicking on the links in the show notes.
As the alchemical motto goes, as above, so below, as within, so without.
May this ancient wisdom continue to guide you deeper.
Until next time, take good care.